Starting your own practice is hard for many chiropractors. It's riddled with both struggles and successes. But here at the Chiropractic Philanthropist, we make it easy by having chiropreneurs and entrepreneurs share their struggles and lessons learned in life and business so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. And now here's your host, Dr. Ed Osborne. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Josh Handt here for the Chiropractic Philanthropist podcast. We have an amazing guest today. You may have actually heard of her, Dr. Heidi Haavik. Welcome.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
I'm excited. I love our pre-show chat. You've been like, I want to say a friend, a colleague, all the above for years now. And you really inspire me because you've taken the science of our profession in such an awesome direction and maybe just are enlightening people. So can you just give people a little bit about you, a little bit of your backstory, who you are?
Right. So I'm the strange accent that I've got is because I'm half Norwegian, half New Zealander, half Kiwi. So my mum's a Kiwi, my dad's Norwegian. So I grew up with a bit of a strange thing going on there. My dad's a medical doctor, but my mother is the granddaughter of one of the first 1,000 chiropractors ever to graduate from Palmer College. So again, I'm a real mixture there. And I think personally, I've ended up with the best of both worlds because I'm a great clinician and I love practicing, but I also have this left brain that that not everybody has. And I also think that, again, some of my family history is this mental health issues, really. But if you don't end up with the full-blown mental health issues, you have this ability to see connections that other people can't see. To me, it's bloody obvious, excuse my French, but it's very obvious that these things connect up and others are scratching their heads going, what are you talking about? Yeah. So anyway, I grew up in Norway, but I ended up in New Zealand just for a 6-month visit, and that's about 30 years ago. And I ended up doing chiropractic college. I was really going to go back into medicine or psychology or something back in Norway. I was literally only going to be here for 6 months, but that didn't work out. So I went through chiropractic college and just loved it. It just like spoke to my heart and it was just right. But I had a very curious mind. So even after I finished chiropractic college, I went on to do neuroscience at Auckland University and ended up doing my PhD there with this amazing Professor Bernadette Murphy. She's like a pioneer in our profession that did neuroscience before anybody else. So she was in 1995. She published her first neuroscience paper. And, she had just graduated chiropractic college and wanted to understand the mechanisms. How can you adjust someone's spine and it change their personality, their function, their health so dramatically? And I've just never looked back. So I ended up the research director at the New Zealand College before I even finished my PhD. And right back in the early days of my PhD, we were seeing the changes. By adjusting the spine, we were seeing the changes in the brain, and that had never been shown before. So I was just bitten by the bug, and, I just never really looked back. And I've spent the last 25 years of my life studying what a subluxation is and how that impacts our brain and our health and why adjustments can impact us in such a broad range of ways.
Yeah, and that's pretty neat, and in our pre-chat, we spoke about like the philosophy, the science, art. It's all really just one big ball of goo, right? You have to have all of it. And
it's like when you bake a cake, right? All the ingredients go into it, but you can't point at the cake and say, oh, there's the egg, or that must be the flour, right? You can't separate them in my world. The science, the philosophy, and the art, they go hand in hand. Yeah. And you can't isolate one thing. Otherwise, it's like with the cake again analogy, you'd only have flour if you look at it in isolation. It's only when it's together that the magic happens. And our forefathers spoke about this too. So, if you actually read your original philosophical green books. Yeah. And so this is interesting because there's a lot of principal docs that are listening. There's a lot of scientific docs or maybe some technique gurus that are listening, if you will. And, the way I thought about this, and you brought it up again, is the philosophy ask the questions that the science should answer maybe, and then we apply the art to see if the philosophy works type of thing, right? Yeah, well, it's slightly the other way around because the philosophers have come up with theories, right?
Okay.
And I mean, they are geniuses, honestly, in their own right, really clever philosophers, and we've had multiple. I mean, I'm proving DD and BJ right now in neuroscience, which is just mind-boggling when you think about how long ago that was. They were saying these things. in particular, the 3 T's and the causes of the subluxation. Remind me about, I'll come back to it. But yeah, they come up with a theory. Scientists, our job is literally to test whether those theories are correct or not. And I don't have any, I don't have any strong feelings about whether they should be right or wrong. I honestly don't care how it works. I know it works. I just want to know how. So I've never had any sort of hang-ups about should this happen or should that happen. I honestly don't care, Josh. I mean, I just want to test, okay, does it actually influence the nervous system? Well, then I should be able to measure it. Okay, I've been measuring it in different ways. I was originally looking for whether we squashed nerve roots, and it turns out we didn't.
Yeah.
So we weren't relieving pressure off squashed nerve roots, but that doesn't mean we don't change the nervous system. There's just subtle new changes with the evolving science of neuroscience. And then, of course, when we do our experiments, I mean, I don't want the students to do any adjustments because I want the artists, I want the chiropractors that can feel it, that can go in there, that can know exactly where they should adjust, where not to adjust, and then be really brilliant at their art of delivering that adjustment. So, yeah, to me, they are indistinguishable. We just have slightly different roles.
Yeah, and you said you were blessed with that left brain, that analytical, I want to know why. And I think that's,
I reckon that's come, yeah, both my parents were ridiculously smart. So my dad's a medical doctor with about 3 specialties, and he's only supposed to have 1 in Norway. And my mother was top of her class. She did dental nursing back in New Zealand, but then wasn't allowed to apply that. So she re-educated herself in a new language in Norway. So they're both brilliant, clever people. And my whole family have got this bipolar in it. So I mean, I'm not health side of things, but if you don't have the full-blown bipolar, if you're on the spectrum, we know that our brains work differently, and two of the key things that they do is we can see connections others can't see, which I reckon is a blessing in my world, but also an ability to communicate with people on any level, because to us there is no sort of, you know, whether you're a king or a pauper on the streets makes no difference. You know, it's just that need to communicate what it is we see, the truth as we see it.
Yeah. And so in your journey, you know, that you're going through a chiropractic school, moving for 6 months, 30 years later, here we are having this conversation.
Yeah.
Right. You chiropractor, running the research lab in New Zealand, author, right?
Yes. Well, I have this need to translate what I find. And I realized very early on, trying to teach the students at the New Zealand College and giving talks, even my best friends were going, "Oh, Heidi, I love listening to you, but I have no idea what you're saying." So I learned very early on, I was like, oh my God, they don't understand me. So I had to translate it. And it took several years, Josh, which is a bit embarrassing to admit, but I never gave up. I needed my students that didn't have a lot of knowledge in anatomy and physiology and science and all the rest of it, I needed them to understand me. So in the end, it ended up in 2014 with me writing my book, The Reality Check, you know, the hand on the blue brain, because what we really, you know, we're not hands on spines, we're actually hands on spines that are influencing brains. And that just took off. So I know that that's spoken to the profession. And I'm now working on my second book called Secrets of the Spine, which is for the public. Because they don't care about chiropractic, but they care about themselves. So it's the secrets of their spines.
That's great. So in the nature of now talking about your book, I always love to look for like success quotes or inspirational quotes. I know you have one there to share.
I do. There's one that's always spoken to my heart, but that's because, Albert Einstein, he said that imagination is even more important than knowledge. For while knowledge defines all that we currently know and understand, imagination points to all that we might yet discover and create. So it goes hand in hand with this philosophy and the science. And it's fantastic we know what we know. And most chiropractors, by the way, do not know their science. But you still need to look beyond that. And that's where, you know, I love the original philosophers. And you know, I find it so fascinating that they could come up with what they did at the time. And I'm now proving them right, like over 100 years later. It just blows my mind.
No, I think that's just says so much about this profession, that the founders, our forefathers, if you will, how in the world did they know? Like, really, how did they
get
know?
this right? It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like right now, the three T's, the trauma, the toxins, and thoughts, which was supposedly the causes of subluxation, and that was DD, I believe. And I'm literally showing now in my studies, like just recently, we published a massive review on the contemporary model of the vertebral subluxation. So it's what's the latest as we understand it. And yes, originally, we know trauma causes this contemporary model of the subluxation. We know stress that sets off your fight and flight response in your body, that shuts down these little muscles close to the spine and skull. And we know inflammation does it. Well, hang on a minute. That's trauma, thoughts, and toxins. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, this is that I think we can keep going down this rabbit hole and be on this call for a long time if we do that.
How amazing would it be if you could practice because you want to, not because you have to? Learn how to improve your cash flow and increase your passive income now. Go to moneyripples.com or find their podcast, The Chris Miles Money Show, to learn more.
In your journey, going from student to clinical director to now full-time researcher, author, what we all, I guess we can say, as a group of our profession, we all learn from our struggles, right? Like from each other's struggles. What has been one of your biggest struggles, whether professionally, personally, that you're willing to share with our audience here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I can think of several. One I am willing to share is in about 2010, I burnt out completely. So I was literally written off for 6 months. And at that stage, I had 2 young children. I'd finished my PhD I was, brand new research director at the New Zealand College, and it just all became too much. So, what I've learned from that, like literally burnt out. I had nothing left. I was a shaking mess. I lost about 20 kilos. I'd walk into any room and I'd burst into tears. couldn't remember my name just about. It was terrible. Even my dog had to go and be taken care of by a friend for about 3 months. My mother flew out from Norway and stayed with me for 4 months, literally just to get me through the days. My 93-year-old grandmother had to literally tuck me into bed one night because I had this minor little, I thought the car was heading straight at me and it wasn't, but my system just went into, I just couldn't function. So that was really, really awful. But what I learned from that is that I can't do it all on my own, and that I need to learn how to cooperate better. And it's been a very interesting, painful, but very rewarding journey. So I now know much more about how to take care of myself. I was very good at giving advice to patients, but I'd never listen myself. So I know I exercise, I make sure I do yoga, I've got supplements coming out my ears, I've learned how to say no to things, I'm very good at delegating. I work within a team. We've got a very vitalistic view on that team too. We all work to our strengths and we share the spoils or the glory. Even in our research team, research can be quite a backstabbing type of environment, but we're very good at working together to each other's strengths. And then we just share whose turn is it to be first author? Okay, it's your turn, but I still do all the writing, but I don't take all of the first authorship credits because that's just how we operate. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very humbling experience, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you had some significant subluxation, right? You had the physical, the chemical, and the emotional, or the thoughts, traumas, and toxins. It just like, it got you.
And Josh, I never got adjusted. I mean, I just can't believe it. But anyway, it's one of those things that I needed to learn in my own way to take care of myself. And we literally have a chiropractor that comes to our house now twice a week. Will adjust me and my husband, and then I'll adjust my kids. Yeah. But I wouldn't be without now.
It's part of your lifestyle, right? It's between the supplements, between the movement, between the drinking water, getting sunshine.
It's the foundation of my health. And I actually believe now from my neuroscience data, because I am a scientist, I have to listen to the data, but the data is telling me that chiropractic care is literally exercising the spine to function better. And when the spine functions better, your brain becomes more accurately able to perceive what's going on in your body and the world around you. So everything, that is the fundamental health cornerstone that we need for my yoga to work better, for my exercise to work better, for the supplements, because the brain needs to be aware of what it needs to absorb. You know what I mean? Everything relies on your brain actually knowing what's going on and being able to respond. I've also learned, obviously, that's where the stress comes into it, because if you're too stressed out, even if the brain is accurately aware, and again, that's why chiropractic doesn't live in isolation, right? And it's never meant to be. It's one key cornerstone part of our overall health, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree. I talk about on my other podcast, I talk about biohacking, if you will. And I said, I'll get asked. And I said, my chiropractic, me getting adjusted is the best biohack in the world, because nothing else, no other systems are going to work optimally, whether I'm taking the world's most expensive supplement,
Exactly.
I'm running on the world's best treadmill or wherever.
Exactly.
It doesn't make a difference. I need to be.
Well, you can actually injure yourself.
Yeah.
Because if the brain isn't accurately aware of what's going on, it's going to be controlling your movements wrong. It's going to be controlling your hormones wrong. It's going to be controlling your autonomic nervous system wrong. And then you're just going to slowly, gradually, it's like 1,000 straws building up on the camel's back. And I talk about that all the time and in my book and everything. Once you end up with symptoms of some kind, it's been 1,000 straws building up over time.
Yeah. So in your research journey, what are some of like the neatest things that maybe our audience might not have known or heard, that's like they might just go, holy cow?
A couple of things that have just, been so exciting in the last few years. Number one is we ended up, because of a massive, amazing neuroscientist, non-chiropractor, he was going, Heidi, when you do what you do, because often I've adjusted the subjects in the studies, we were talking about that, I've got those clinical skills as well as the left brain. But anyway, he goes, when you guys do what you do, it's like you enable that person's brain to more efficiently utilize the afferent information and more effectively produce force. And I just about fell off my chair. And I don't worry about not necessarily following me on that one. But he then turned around and goes, if you can do this to normal people and elite athletes, we should try the opposite end of the scale, where people have lost their ability to activate their muscles. We should do this in stroke victims. And I just about fell off my chair. We have a connection to stroke victims that is not so ideal. And he was going, well, do you cause strokes? And I'm like, no, all the research shows we don't. And, I talked about, the Church study and the Cassidy study and the Koslow study. And he was going, okay, well, we should do that study then. And we did, Josh. And what we found was we actually improved function in stroke victims that have that aren't able to utilize their muscles properly. We've done about 5 basic science studies and a clinical trial showing that beyond physiotherapy rehabilitation, if you add chiropractic into it, they have another clinically meaningful, massive improvement, not massive, but large, significant improvement that's clinically meaningful above and beyond just normal physio rehabilitation. But another one that's, again, almost more exciting to me, because I've always been on a quest to understand how chiropractic care works. And I know that we can improve function and we can reduce pain. I mean, that's just a given, right? But how can you get all of these changes in personality? Why do all my patients come in and say they no longer need to take their blood pressure medication? Why do I get so many people that come and tell me that, I used to get the flu every year and I've never been sick since I've been seeing you? Like those kinds of things you can't explain. Just it doesn't make sense until we discovered, and we ended up in Denmark doing this whole head EEG study where this bioengineer, Dina Lalick, who didn't even believe in chiropractic at all, like she was almost anti, she comes to me and she was absolutely mind blown because she saw these people come back and just about kiss me because they were feeling so much better from like a single adjustment, right? And then she finds that the changes that are happening in people's brains are the prefrontal cortex. And I don't think the profession yet understand the enormity of that finding, and that we have then shown this multiple times. So we're now doing a clinical trial because we have shown now multiple times that we affect processing in the prefrontal cortex. So what might that mean? So then I, as a neuroscientist, started to look at it, right? What might that mean? And I'm saying might now. So I started reading about the prefrontal cortex. Well, guess what? The prefrontal cortex is vitally important for coordination of movement. Makes sense. Vitally important for pain processing. Okay, makes sense. Vitally important for our executive functions, our intelligence, how we perceive the world, literally us being who we are. Vitally important for our emotional health and mental well-being. I'm going, that's interesting. vitally important for our autonomic, our neuroendocrine system, particularly combating the stress hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. I'm thinking very interesting. It's known to inhibit the sympathetic nervous system, your fight and flight stress response in the autonomic nervous system, but it's also responsible, directly activates the vagus, the vagal anticholinergic system. So it's directly activates your relaxation, healing, digesting, and reproducing system. And you think, oh, now we're talking.
Yeah.
And it's vital for reducing inflammation in the body. And I don't know if you've read much about inflammation is the biggest cause of all of today's, killers. So, it's one of the main indicators of cardiovascular disease, stroke, Crohn's disease, chronic pain, you name it, it's underlying it. Because it dampens the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis and it dampens the sympathetic nervous system and activates the anticholinergic, anti-inflammatory system, there's the reason why it changes your inflammatory levels. So it's also known to be absolutely vital for our immune system. And I'm sitting there going, well, blow me away. Here we've got the explanation why people feel better, function better, their immune system works better, they can control their bodily systems better because we changed the autonomic nervous system. I'm going might, and I know it needs to be proven, but that's literally what we're trying to do right now. We're running a randomized controlled trial and assessing 12 weeks of chiropractic care, again, documenting the changes in the brain, which has now kind of been proven by multiple other groups as well, that we change prefrontal cortex in different populations, different labs, different places around the world. But now we're also going to be, as secondary measures, we're going to be measuring these things like sleep, resilience, mental health, executive function, so our intelligence, coordination, movement, neuroimmune markers, inflammatory markers. It's an incredible study. And if I may be a bit sneaky, we desperately need some help in fundraising for it. So if there's anyone that's gotten very excited about this, Josh has a link to where you could help us make this a reality. We do need to raise some money quite desperately.
I mean, that alone, I mean, if you just think like, I've been practicing since 2006, and the stuff that I have seen in my short time, if you will, seeing patients has been amazing. And all of those things, like people getting pregnant. I don't get sick when I see you. Like all of these things, it's like, in my head, I'm like, I just point to the autonomic chart, go, yeah, we affect those things, but you're actually
we never know
it.
and how or why.
Yeah.
We used to think we relieve pressure off squashed nerve roots. We don't. We don't take pressure off squashed nerve roots. That's kind of been debunked. But what every single subluxation does is that it interferes with your brain's ability to accurately perceive what's going on inside your body or in the world around you. Like we've even done studies, Josh, where we've shown adjusting subluxations improves the way your brain perceives sound and visual information. And that's going to make quite a few neuroscientists scratch their head and you're going, what's it? Your brain adjusting the spine improves your brain's ability to perceive sound and visual information. Well, doesn't that put a different light on Harvey Lillard then, from our
history?
You know what I mean? We're not talking about, cranial nerves or necessarily changing pressure on cranial nerves. We may, but what we do know is the way the brain interprets sound and visual information, the way it's integrated. And prefrontal cortex is one of the biggest multi-sensory integrators that we have. And we've shown, again, we change it, but we want to now, document which functions might be improving. So hence we've got, it's not the be all and end all. We'll probably need to repeat it, and we'll probably need to do it in larger samples, but it's the first study of its kind. And please, if you're slightly excited about this, help us out.
Yeah. And if you know anybody that's lots of money, right? Also that's willing to hand over a bunch of it.
Yeah, but it's expensive. It's ridiculously expensive. And it's like, I've, again, before I burnt out completely, you can tell how passionate I am, right? So I've put every penny I have, any excess penny I have goes straight into the research. I've fundraised for so many different things too, but I would, if we needed something, my colleagues would always ring me, Heidi, we desperately need, if we have another $500, we've got another $1,000. I'm like, yeah, go for it. I'll pay for it. But it's like, again, what I've learned is we need to collaborate. The chiropractors out there in the profession, you need me to do what I do so that, we can change the way the world views what chiropractic is. And that is my mission, is to enlighten the world about the science of chiropractic.
Yeah. So that's one heck of a message. And it's powerful. You know, what you do. And when I said this already once, but you're bringing light. It's like that beacon, that light, that spotlight's getting put on, like wait, this is what we really do.
But we do that? You know it's true though, right? Every clinician I talk to, they go, Heidi, you've hit it. You've hit the nail on the head. This explains exactly what happens in practice. That's how I know that I'm on the right track. If what I was finding, it doesn't gel with what you're seeing in practice, then I'm screwing something up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the fact that the message I'm coming with, chiropractors are going, oh my God, this is it. It makes so much sense. But, you know, and again, it's irrefutable. I mean, once you start, it's irrefutable. I can talk to any neuroscientist, any neurosurgeon on the planet, and I can explain what a subluxation is in their own language. And I even tend to say, I talk about it being a central segmental motor control problem, which really just means the brain's unaware of what's going on in the spine, so it's not controlling the spinal movement appropriately. But the consequences of that interferes with interoception and exteroception, which literally means it interferes with how the brain perceives what's going on in the body and the world around you. So however, I don't care what words you use. See, I'm bilingual, you know.
Yeah.
I'm Norwegian.
You speak human and scientist.
And scientists and clinicians. I don't care what language we use, but it's the concepts that matter. And I can explain that concept in neuroscience speak, and I can explain that concept to a kid on the street. But it's the same concept.
Yeah. Yeah. So here, I'm gonna shift gears for a second. So if we had a time machine right now, and we went back to you when you were starting in chiropractic college, and you can tell your young self, your younger self,
you
know, give yourself some advice. What would you say? What would you give?
Trust your gut instincts. And there's this special place where your head, your heart, and your gut align when you almost get the tingles. I don't know what, how you know, but when your head, heart, and gut aligns, follow that direction, whether you understand it or not. I never set out, Josh, to do what I'm doing, but I always knew which next step was right because it had that alignment. I sometimes went the wrong way, hence I burnt out completely, and I wasn't listening to my head, heart, and gut in that instincts. So I would be, your own innate intelligence knows. It knows. I don't know how, but we know what the truth is. We know what the right thing is. And if you want to sort of fulfill your destiny, I don't know, I'm descendants from Vikings, and destiny is all. I don't know if you've watched any Viking movies, but, I do believe in a destiny, and that, we are here for a purpose. And just, trust your head, heart, and gut. When they align, you're on the right path. That's
great. So I have three final questions I'm going to ask you. They're going to be like that lightning, this quick round here.
Far away.
And we'll wrap things up in a few minutes here. So first question, who's the greatest influence on who you are as a person today, or who has been?
I think it's my mother. I know that's probably quite, just the smartest woman I know, the most caring person I know, suffered shitloads in her own life. But always been there for me, always supported me no matter what.
Okay. Question 2. What is the best advice you have ever received?
Oh, that's a tough one. Best advice I've ever received. The best advice in my recent 10 years has been I've learned to listen. I was told I wasn't very good at allowing people to feel heard, because I just bulldoze straight ahead. and that's kind of probably saved my current marriage, is that I have learned to shut up and just let the people around me feel heard. Not that I wasn't hearing them, but they weren't feeling heard.
Got it. All right. And then one final question is, what invaluable resource, whether it's like a book, a podcast, that you cannot live without?
I'm going to twist that ever so slightly. Google Scholar. I don't necessarily listen to podcasts, or I don't read a lot of books, but I am on Google Scholar every day, literally digesting the research literature on chiropractic. I live and breathe it. It is so much easier than you might think. And I'd highly recommend every chiropractor puts Google Scholar on their to-do list and just start asking some questions in Google Scholar, and you'd be amazed at what's actually out there.
All right. So I'll say this to start finishing things up. Everybody listening, you'll be able to find all the resources, everything we've spoken about today, the book, the research, the links that Heidi is going to be sharing. You can and also find it over at the chiropracticphilanthropist.com. So Heidi, I truly love this conversation, the pre-recording and through the recording as well. You inspire me, and I know you definitely inspire this profession. You've had a profound impact on my family personally. They all love you. From the time we've been around each other in person. So it's really great connecting with you again. And I'm going to ask you just one more time, like, what's the best place for people to find you?
Okay, so there's depends what you're after. So if you go to drheidi.net, I believe is the one place that's got links to everything. But we've got a resource library of tools to help enlighten the public about chiropractic care. There's chirosacademy.com, which is a learning platform where we teach chiropractors all this content in a slower. I speak slower, I swear. If not, my editing guy, he just slows down my speech. So you can learn the science, because it's our science. Every chiropractor should learn it. So that's chirosacademy.com. The Reality Check has got the resource library. It's going to become Chiro's Hub very soon. HeidiHaavik.com is where my book is, where you can book me for events. And then there's a very important website that you really need to get right, which is research.chiropractic.ac.nz. That's where you can help fund this research study. It's through the New Zealand College of Chiropractic, where I'm their vice president of research. So that's a charitable trust. The college is run from a trust. It's where you can donate large amounts, because it is a charitable trust. But even small amounts, if many people do small amounts, we can get the 200 grand that we need to be able to run this big prefrontal cortex study. And that's, probably. And then there's a couple of links there that I've sent you through to, Josh, there's some free review articles that we've written last year. If you want to read about the contemporary model of the chiropractic subluxation, if you want to read about the neuroimmune connection, there's a lot of basic science. There's no clinical science, but there's very important basic sciences. And again, through the prefrontal cortex connection, we can explain our impact on immune function. So if you're interested in following some of this up, there's some free resources, there's some, paid resources, there's some, if you want to communicate it to the rest of the world and help me on my mission of enlightening the world about the science of chiropractic, those resources are available too.
Oh, awesome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, Dr. Heidi Haavik, everybody, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for giving back to the profession today. And we're sharing you with the world. Thank you again.
Thanks, Josh.
So you've heard the struggles, you've heard the successes, and this episode is done. But there's still so much more to come and so much more to learn. Head on over to the chiropracticphilanthropist.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive free practice building tips and strategies, including how to market your practice with your very own podcast and so much more. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Chiropractic Philanthropist.